With assembly elections round the corner in Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh, alongside general elections expected early next year, the centre is gearing up to woo its voters. India's fiscal balance has been under strain in recent years, marked by a widening fiscal deficit and increasing public debt. In a recent data released by the Controller General of Accounts, India's fiscal deficit in the first 5 months of FY24 widened to 6.42 trillion rupees. This means that the deficit has already met 36% of the full year target of the government's ceiling of 17.87 trillion rupees. Compared to the same period last year, the fiscal deficit stood at 32.6% of the target set by the government for FY23. In a recent report, the World Bank projected an overall fiscal deficit, the centre and states combined, of 8.7% of the GDP. It further said that the public debt is expected to stabilize at 83% of the GDP. The World Bank also forecast that there would be minimal impact on India's fiscal plans due to the upcoming elections. But the widening deficit has posed the central and state governments with the challenge of maintaining fiscal prudence while trying to win over voters. Earlier this month, the Union government announced an increase in the subsidy on LPG cylinders under the Ujjwala scheme to 300 rupees. The scheme, which provides poor women with free cooking gas connections, a 14.2 kg LPG cylinder will now cost 603 rupees. In FY23, 6,100 crore rupees was provided as Ujjwala subsidy, which was increased to 7,680 crore rupees for the fiscal year 2023-24. While the move is slated to benefit nearly 10 crore households, will put strain on the government's fiscal. Experts are of the opinion that other schemes like the free food grain distribution scheme, which is slated to end in December this year, might see an extension owing to the elections. The 15th installment of the PM Kisan scheme, which aims to provide an annual support of 6,000 rupees to land-holding farmers, might also be disbursed as the election nears. The 14th installment was released in July this year to about 8.5 crore farmer beneficiaries. So, can the upcoming elections put stress on the government's economic consolidation plans?
There will definitely be certain challenges which will come about. Here particularly I'm referring to something like the LPG prices, which were lowered by 300 rupees, first by 200 then 300. This evidently means that there is going to be an increase in terms of what we call the overall subsidy bill on LPG. With the crude oil price going up, there would be a tendency for losses to mount for the oil marketing companies. And there could be certain pressure at some point of time for the government to intervene and probably lower the excise duty. If they do that, then there will again be a loss of revenue on account of tax collections on fuel products. So these, along with the possibilities of other kind of sops being provided, could actually put certain pressure on the overall fiscal balances.
And it's not just the centre eyeing the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. States like Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh are going to polls by the end of this year. The Rajasthan government in its budget for FY24 aimed for a fiscal deficit of 4% of the gross state domestic product or GSDP. Meanwhile, Chhattisgarh projected its fiscal deficit at 2.99% of the GSDP, comfortably below the 3% limit mandated by the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003. Meanwhile, Madhya Pradesh anticipated a deficit of 4% of the GSDP in its budgetary estimates. However, as the states approach election season, a slew of sops are being announced by the incumbent governments to woo the voters. The Rajasthan government launched the Chief Minister Free Annapurna Food Packet Scheme on 15th August, under which it will distribute free food packets to more than 10 million people. While the move is aimed at aiding the poor, reportedly the scheme will cost the Ashok Gehlot government 4,500 crore rupees annually. In July, the Bhupesh Baghel-led government in Madhya Pradesh announced that the contractual workers in the state will now have access to pensions, health insurance and gratuity benefits to par with the state government employees. This leads to the question, how will the state's attempts to woo the voters have a bearing on state finances and the overall fiscal situation?
As it is the post-COVID, the fiscal conditions at the state level is really very weak, particularly when you look at some of the states. Some of the states are actually facing at a fiscal crisis. It certainly will put huge pressure on the state finances, but the casualty would be, in my view, is the state's capital expenditure strategy, which will have a long-lasting impact on the state.
However, populist measures do bring in some relief for the poor amid high inflationary environment. So, how can the government strike the right political economy balance during elections?
We have to realize that I think all governments come to power based on certain promises made to the public and that they have to adhere to it also. So therefore, there are certain political economy compulsions which are there, which makes states actually keep spending on various line items. But I think the task actually finally is that how do you manage both of them? So I think that's why we have the FRBM, we have these norms which have been laid down, saying that in case you're going to spend something more on X, which is supposedly what you're calling freebies, then there's obviously less money left in case we don't see the kind of buoyancy in revenue, in which case you'll have to cut back on other expenditures.
As India prepares for the upcoming state and general elections, governments have a responsibility to address the needs of their citizens. A balanced approach is essential to ensure the fiscal stability of the nation. Analysts believe that governments need to prioritize fiscal discipline by carefully evaluating the long-term fiscal impact of any proposed welfare scheme.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.
She's working her way to the corner office. Business Standard.